Hi and welcome. I'm Midnight Truth, and it's so nice to have you here tonight. Wherever you are right now, whether you're in bed, lie on the couch, or just looking for a quiet moment, I want you to know this time is for you. Take a deep breath in, and as you breathe out, feel the weight of the day start to fade. Let your mind settle. Let your body relax, and let yourself simply be. There's no rush, no pressure, just this calm, quiet moment. If you like, you can close your eyes and imagine yourself in a peaceful place. Maybe it's a cozy room with soft, warm lighting. Or maybe it's under a starry sky, with a gentle breeze brushing against you. Wherever you feel safe and calm, let yourself drift there. I know many of you use these stories to fall asleep. So before we begin, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from and what time is it there? Tonight's story is gentle and soothing, perfect to carry you into a deep, restful sleep. So settle in, get comfortable, and let's begin. They say when your life falls apart, the best thing to do is start over somewhere new. After my divorce, that's exactly what I was looking for, a new beginning, a clean slate. Something far away from the memories that used to feel like home, but had turned into reminders of everything I lost. When I stumbled on the listing for the old two-story house on Rosa Lane, I didn't think twice. It was cheap, spacious, and tucked in a quiet corner of a small town where no one knew my name. That's what I wanted most. To disappear. I arrived on a cold afternoon in October. The sky was dull, painted with shades of gray, and a slow, persistent wind rustled through the thinning trees, as if the town itself was whispering. The house stood at the edge of a long, cracked driveway, its wooden frame leaning slightly, almost as if it retired from standing for so many years. The paint had long faded into a dirty, peeling cream, and the roof sagged in places like a weary expression. Still, it had charm, old charm, character. At least that's what I told myself. The inside smelled like time. Not mildew, not rot, just age. Like something had been waiting, untouched, for longer than it should have. The floors groaned under my feet with every step, and the walls held scratches and faded stains, like the skin of something that had seen too much. I spent the first 2 days settling in. There wasn't much to unpack. A few boxes of clothes, some books, a battered old coffee table, and a mattress I dragged up the bedroom at the end of the hall on the second floor. The room had a window that looked out over the backyard, mostly dead grass and a leaning fence, and a small closet with a door that didn't quite close. The nights were quiet, and at first, I found the stillness comforting. No traffic, no city hum, no shouting neighbors. Just the sound of the wind and the occasional creak from the old beams above. I told myself I could get used to this, that maybe this was what peace looked like. On my third day in town, I met my neighbor. Her name was Mrs. Porter, and she lived alone in the house next door, which was nearly as old as mine. She was in her 70s, with sharp blue eyes and a voice like rustling leaves, soft, dry, and a little uneasy. She watched me from her porch as I carried groceries from my car, and eventually she called out, "You moved into number 17? I nodded. Just a few days ago. She didn't smile. Instead, she tilted her head and squinted at me like she was trying to remember something important. "You live alone?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "Just me?" A long pause. She took a sip from a chipped teacup and finally said, "That house, it's been empty for a while." I nodded. "Seems like it. Still, not bad for price." She looked down into her cup, then up at me again. "Last tenant didn't stay long," she said. "Oh, about 3 months. Left in the middle of the night. Never came back for her things." I raised an eyebrow. "Really? Why?" Mrs. Porter hesitated, then leaned slightly closer. She said the house talked to her. I laughed, though something in her tone made the air feel colder. She was probably just unstable or something. "Maybe," she said, "or maybe the house didn't like her." That was the end of the conversation. She stood, turned, and went back inside without another word. I laughed again, alone now, brushing it off. Small towns came with small town superstitions. Stories passed down to keep kids from breaking into old homes. It didn't mean anything. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. The wind tapped the window pane like cautious fingers. Somewhere downstairs, a floorboard creaked. It was probably just the wood settling. I knew that. Still, I listened a little more closely than I had the night before. The next day, I explored more of the house. The basement was damp and unfinished, with crumbling stone walls and a rusted water heater. The attic was empty except for a torn lampshade and a box of old photos too faded to make out. In the hallway near the stairs, I found a small panel in the wall. Behind it was a narrow crawl space filled with dust and cobwebs. Nothing unusual, just old, just forgotten. At least, that's what I thought then. That night, the noises started again, heavier this time. It began with a loud knock from downstairs. Just once, then silence. I sat up listening. A second knock followed, slow and deliberate. I stood, heart thudding, and crept out into the hallway. The house was dark, shadows stretching long across the floorboards. I flipped the hall light on, but it flickered and went out immediately. Another knock, closer now. It sounded like it came from the kitchen. I told myself it could be a loose shutter or something falling over. But when I reached the bottom of the stairs and turned the corner, everything was exactly as I'd left it. Still, the air felt off, thicker somehow, heavier. I didn't sleep much that night. Over the next few days, the noises got worse. Footsteps above my room. Even when I knew no one else was in the house. The sound of furniture dragging across the floor, though nothing had moved. Whispers, just at the edge of hearing, like someone murmuring behind a closed door. I stopped going into certain rooms at night. One morning, I woke up to find all the cabinet doors in the kitchen wide open. I stood there in silence, staring at them, waiting for something to make sense. They hadn't been like that when I went to bed. Maybe I sleepwalked. I told myself, maybe I'm more stressed than I thought. I called my sister that afternoon, told her everything was fine, lied. I didn't want to leave. Not yet. I'd already started over once, and the idea of giving up so soon made me feel like a failure. But the house wasn't done with me. It was the cold that finally pushed me to look deeper. Not the cold of the season, but something else, sudden pockets of freezing air, always in the same spot at the top of the stairs. No draft, no broken window. Just cold, sharp and biting, like walking through something that shouldn't be there. I noticed it most at night. I climbed the stairs after brushing my teeth, and just as I reached the landing, it would hit me. A chill so deep it stole my breath. Then I'd hear it, a faint exhale, like someone breathing just behind me. I'd turn. Nothing. Then I found the journal. It was tucked behind a loose panel in the closet, the one that wouldn't close all the way, wrapped in cloth, brittle with age. The handwriting inside was elegant but shaky. The ink faded. The entries were strange. Ramblings about symbols, dark rooms, voices in the walls. One line was underlined 3 times. The door was never supposed to stay open. I didn't understand what it meant. Not yet. But I would. Soon. Because something had started watching me. And it was getting closer. The journal stayed on my nightstand for days before I opened again. I wasn't sure why I hesitated. Maybe I was afraid of what I'd find. Or maybe a part of me already knew it wasn't just nonsense. There was something about the handwriting, tight, nervous strokes, like whoever wrote had been glancing over their shoulder the whole time. The paper smelled like smoke and old wood, and when I finally opened again, I noticed smudges near the bottom of some pages, as if someone's fingers had trembled while writing. I read through the first few pages slowly. Asterisk March 3rd. I heard it again last night, in the walls this time. I thought I sealed it. Asterisk March 9th. The marks are fading. I need more chalk. The symbols have to be redrawn by moonlight, or they lose strength. Asterisk March 11th. There's something wrong with the mirror. It showed a room behind me. But when I turned around, the room was empty. Asterisk. Whoever wrote this wasn't just rambling. They were documenting. Recording something they were trying to keep at bay. My skin crawled the deeper I read. The entries stretched over months, then stopped abruptly. No signature. No goodbye. Just one last line, almost carved into the page with how deep the pen had dug into the paper. Asterisk if you're reading this. Don't stay here alone. It watches from the corners. Asterisk. I closed the journal and placed it back under the mattress. That night, I woke up gasping. I didn't remember falling asleep, but I remembered the dream. No, not a dream, a memory. Or at least it felt like one. I was in the crawl space, the small one behind the panel near the stairs, but it wasn't empty. There were candles, flickering dim, a circle drawn on the floor in chalk, smeared in places like someone had tried to wipe it away in a panic. In the center, there was a chair, and in that chair sat something that wasn't human. I couldn't see its face, only its hands, long, pale fingers curled tightly around the arms of the chair, nails like splinters. The sound of breathing filled the space. Not mine. Heavy, wet. When I woke up, I couldn't move at first. Something pressed against my chest, holding me still. The room was silent, but the air was dense, humid, like the house was exhaling on me. When I finally sat up, my throat was dry, and the bedroom felt wrong, like I wasn't supposed to be there. That morning, I pulled open the crawl space again. There were no candles, no chalk, no chair, just dust and shadows and the sharp scent of iron that hadn't been there before. By the fifth night, I started locking my bedroom door. I don't know what I thought it would do. Maybe buy me time if something tried to get in. Maybe it was just a comfort thing, a barrier between me and the rest of the house. But the house had other ways in. I started hearing my name. Not loudly, not screamed, whispered. It would come when I was brushing my teeth, or putting on a shirt, or folding laundry. Just soft enough that I doubt it. Like someone was standing just behind the door, murmuring. Once I answered, just to see. Yes. Nothing. Then, just as I was about to turn away, a single knock on the wall. No one on the other side. I didn't leave the house for 3 days. Something about going outside felt wrong, like I wasn't allowed to anymore, like the house had curled around me and locked the doors from the inside. Not the real doors, but something else. Every time I tried to step out, a heavy pressure built behind my eyes. My hands would tremble. My legs refused to move. I don't know how to explain it, except to say that the house didn't want me to go. Then came the night the mirror changed. It was a small one above the bathroom sink, old, the silver peeling at the corners. I was shaving when I noticed it. My reflection moved half a second too late. Not enough to be obvious, but enough that it made my spine go stiff. I stared at it, watching for delay. It didn't happen again. But then, as I turned off the tap and dried my face, I caught something in the corner of the glass. A figure, not behind me, but to the side, as if standing just off the frame. Pale, still. When I turned to look, nothing was there. Of course. I didn't sleep at all that night. I pulled out the journal again. Read deeper. Asterisk April 2nd. It wants to be seen. That's how it begins. Reflections. Shadows. Dreams. You notice it and it notices you. Asterisk. Asterisk April 6th. The door is in the floor, beneath the basement boards. I found the key in the fireplace. Asterisk. I paused. The fireplace. It was in the living room, old and unused. The kind with a thick stone mantel and rusted grate. I hadn't paid much attention to it before, but the mention of a key lodged something cold in my chest. The next morning, I stood in front of it with a flashlight. The ash was old, packed down. Cobwebs crisscross the flue. I reached in, hesitantly, running my hand along the back. Then the sides. Nothing. I was about to give up when I felt a small notch under the edge of the brick ledge. A loose stone. I pried it free. Behind it, buried in dust, was a small, black iron key. It was warm to the touch. I dropped it immediately, heart racing. But it didn't bounce. It didn't clink. It just landed, softly, like the house was holding it. I didn't pick it up again. Not then. That night, the breathing came back. It started at the foot of my bed. Slow, heavy inhales that made the mattress creak. I stayed frozen, eyes wide, staring at the ceiling, too afraid to move, too afraid to breathe. Then I felt the weight. Something sat on the edge of the mattress. I felt it dip. I felt the sheets pull tight around me. I kept my eyes closed, muscles locked, waiting for it to end. But it didn't end. It leaned closer. I felt cold breath on my cheek. Then, softly, almost kindly, it whispered my name. I screamed. The lights flickered to life, and the room was empty. I left the house the next day, drove around town, tried to stay gone as long as I could. But no matter how far I went, the sense of being watched followed me. The reflection in shop windows, the hush of footsteps behind me that vanished when I turned. When I finally returned home just before dusk, I found the front door open, not wide, just a crack, like an invitation. Inside, everything was exactly how I left it, except for the key. It was sitting in the middle of the hallway, waiting. The key sat there in the middle of the floor like it had been carefully placed. Not dropped, not kicked, placed. Its dull black metal glinted faintly in the hallway's fading light. And for a long time I just stood there, watching it. My shoes didn't move. My hand wouldn't reach out. Something about it felt final. Like picking it up would be a decision I couldn't undo. But I did it anyway. My fingers closed around it. It felt colder than anything I'd ever touched. Like ice pulled from the bottom of a lake in winter. The cold didn't go away. Even after I tucked it in my pocket, it was like it was sinking into me. I locked every door and window before bed that night. Even nailed the bedroom door shut from the inside. I knew it wouldn't stop anything, but I needed to feel like I had some control, that maybe if I kept the thing out, it would lose interest and go away. It didn't. At exactly 3:12 a.m., the scratching began. It started faint, like a mouse behind the wall, but it grew louder, stronger, like fingernails dragging across wood. It came from the floor, just under the bed, and then I heard whispering. Not in English, not in any language I recognized. It was low and guttural, like someone speaking from the bottom of a well. I pressed my hands over my ears, but I could still hear it, inside my skull. Then came the knock, not at the door, from under the bed. 3 slow, heavy thuds. I didn't move. Couldn't. The whispering stopped. The scratching stopped. Then silence. I must have passed out from exhaustion or fear, because when I opened my eyes, it was morning. The light was thin and pale, the kind that makes everything feel unreal, like a dream that had followed me out of sleep. I pulled the mattress away and checked under the bed. Nothing. But the floorboards, something was different. One of them was slightly lifted, like it had been pried up and not put back properly. My heart sank. That night, I returned to the journal. Asterisk April 10th. It called me by name again. It waits for the moment I believe it's real. That's when it comes through. Asterisk April 11th. The key opens a basement, but the real door is beneath, buried under layers of time and dust. Don't go down there alone. It waits for you in the dark. Asterisk. I stood at the basement door for nearly 20 minutes before opening it. The key fit the old iron lock perfectly, sliding in with a soft click. The door groaned open. Cold air rolled out in waves, carrying the smell of mildew, earth, and something deeper, something faintly metallic, like rust or dried blood. I stepped down slowly. The stairs were steep and narrow, the wood worn smooth in the middle from years of use. The light switch didn't work, of course, so I used a flashlight. Its beam shook with my hand, bouncing shadows off the walls. The basement was bigger than I thought. It stretched deeper under the house than I'd realized. Rows of old shelving units stood like sentinels, covered in yellowing tarps and cobwebs. At the far end, the floor was bare concrete, except for a small wooden hatch. It had no handle, just a keyhole. I didn't want to try it, but I did. The black key slid in easily. With a slow twist, the hatch creaked open, revealing a set of narrow stone steps descending into absolute blackness. No light reached down there. The beam of the flashlight seemed to die just a few feet into it. Swallowed whole. I don't know what made me go down. Maybe I wanted answers. Maybe I wanted to prove to myself that I wasn't losing my mind. The steps were slick with moisture. I gripped the flashlight tighter, using the walls to guide myself. The air was thicker down there and colder. Every breath felt like it dragged ice into my lungs. Then I reached the bottom. The room, if you could call it that, was circular. Stone walls, black with age. Symbols were carved into the rock. Not just drawn, asterisk carved star. Deep, angry lines that looked like they'd been gouged out with sharp tools. Some of them were smeared with something dark, dried. In the center was a circle of ash. It looked burned in. Not recent, but not old either. Around it were more of those symbols. Candles sat at 5 points of the circle, melted down to stubs. And in the middle, something lay covered in a stained cloth. I shouldn't have approached it, but I did. As I reached the edge of the circle, my flashlight flickered and died. I stood frozen in the dark, trying not to breathe too loudly. The silence was oppressive, pressing in on me like a living thing. Then I heard movement, not footsteps, a dragging sound, slow, from behind me. I turned quickly. Nothing. Then a whisper, so close to my ear it made me recoil. Asterisk stay. Asterisk. The cloth in the center of the circle moved. It rose just a little, as if something underneath had taken a shallow breath. That's when I ran. I didn't look back. I didn't stop. I scrambled up the stone steps, nearly slipping, heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I slammed the hatch shut behind me and locked it, but I didn't throw the key away. I couldn't. I think part of me already knew I might need it again. That night, something knocked on my bedroom wall 3 times, and then it whispered again, low and patient. Asterisk, you saw me now. Asterisk. I didn't sleep that night, not even for a second. I sat in the corner of the bedroom with the lights on, blanket wrapped around me like armor. The key was still in my pocket, heavy, ice cold. Every so often, I reached in just to make sure it was still there, still real. The knocking didn't come again, the whisper either, but silence had never felt so loud. The walls felt closer somehow, like the house was breathing, like it had inhaled when I arrived, and now it was holding its breath, waiting. The next morning, I tried to act like a normal person. I took a shower, ate toast, even went for a walk to the neighborhood, just to feel the sun on my face and remind myself that there was a world outside that basement. That's when I saw her again. Mrs. Edna, the old neighbor. She was in her yard, pruning some roses that looked half dead. Her house was a little crooked, like it was trying to lean away from mine. I hesitated at first, but then I forced myself to walk over. Morning, I said. She didn't look up, just kept clipping. Morning. I've been meaning to ask you something. I started. About this house. About what you said before. She looked up this time. Her eyes were pale, almost clouded, but sharp underneath. Too sharp for someone her age. You mean the people before you? Yes. She sighed and stuck her shears into the dirt. Didn't last long. Month, maybe 2. Nice young couple. She left one night in her slippers. Just ran out into the street screaming. He packed up and left the next morning. What did she say? Mrs. Edna shrugged, but I could tell it wasn't because she didn't know. It was because she didn't want to say it out loud. Said the house talked to her. She said finally, said something walked through the walls at night, that it knew her name. That last part made my skin crawl. Has this happened before? I asked. She gave me a long look. I've lived here 53 years, she said. Watched 10 people come and go from that house. It doesn't want anyone staying long. The house doesn't like company. I tried to laugh, but it came out thin and dry. Come on, it's just an old place. Her face didn't change. Old places remember things, she said. They remember pain. Rituals. Screams. When you soak within that kind of suffering, it doesn't forget. It breathes it, holds it, waits. I didn't ask anything else. What could I say? I thanked her and walked back home, but the house felt different now, like it had overheard the whole conversation, like I'd offended it. That night, the cold started. I turned up the heat, lit the fireplace, piled on blankets, but the cold wasn't normal. It came from the floor, from the walls, from inside. My breath fogged in the air as I sat in the living room. It was below freezing in there, but only in that room. The others were fine. Then the lights went out. All of them. At once. Silence felt like a blanket. I stood frozen, heart racing, when I heard again. Footsteps. Upstairs. Slow. Heavy. Pacing. One end of the hall to the other. Back and forth. I should have left. Right then. Should have run out into the street like that woman before me. But I didn't. I grabbed a flashlight and crept up the stairs. Each step creaked under my weight, the sound loud and wrong in the silence. When I reached the top, the footsteps stopped. I stood in the hallway, listening. Nothing. I pushed open the door to the guest room. Empty. Same with the bathroom. Then I opened the door to the room at the end of the hall. The air hit me like a fist. Cold. Wet. Wrong. The window was wide open, curtains flapping even though there was no wind. And in the center of the floor, something had been scratched into the wood. Not drawn. Scratched. Long, deep gouges in a spiral pattern, almost like a snail shell. Inside the spiral was a single word, etched over and over. Open. I backed away, heart pounding, and shut the door. It took everything I had not to run out right then. But I went back to the journal instead. The next entry chilled me more than the basement ever had. Asterisk April 12th. The spiral appeared last night. It marks the thinning. The place where the veil is weak. Don't step inside it. Don't say its name. It wants you to say its name. Asterisk. I didn't know what name it meant, but I knew what spiral it referred to. That night, I slept in the living room. I pulled the couch away from the walls. Slept with a flashlight in one hand and the key in the other. The light stayed off. The cold got worse, but there were no sounds. Until 3:12 a.m., every window in the house slammed open at once. Wind howled through the rooms, knocking things over. I ran from room to room trying to close them, but something was wrong. None of them would budge. It was like the house had decided they were meant to stay open. The front door opened by itself, just slowly creaked open into the night. I stood at the threshold, hard in my throat, when I heard something behind me. The floor creaked. I turned. Nothing. Then I looked down. A single wet footprint. Bare. Human. Leading from the spiral upstairs to where I stood. Another appeared in front of it. Then another. Coming toward me. But there was no one there. I ran out the door. Didn't stop until I reached the sidewalk. Didn't sleep that night. Didn't go back inside until the sun was up. Even then, I checked every corner, every closet, every wall. The spiral was gone. The windows were closed. The lights were on, like it had never happened. But I know it did. I can still feel the cold. I can still hear the footsteps if I sit still long enough. And I think it's waiting for me to say its name. Whatever it is. The next few days blurred together. I tried to live normally, as much as that was possible. I still went to work, smiled at people in the hallway, answered emails, made coffee. On the outside, I looked fine, but inside I was unraveling. I kept hearing things, soft knocks behind walls, faint humming when the house was quiet, and sometimes breathing, clothes. Just behind me, I started leaving lights on in every room. The electric bill was going to be outrageous, but I didn't care. Darkness wasn't safe anymore. It was like the house used it, like it moved in the shadows, waited in them. I avoided the upstairs, and I didn't go near the spiral room. Not after that night. But the house, it didn't like being ignored. One morning, I woke up with dirt on my feet. Real dirt. Wet, cold soil like I'd been walking through a forest barefoot. The bed sheets were streaked with it. My toenails were caked in mud. The back door was unlocked. I reviewed the camera footage from the tiny doorbell cam I'd installed. Nothing. Just static from 2:47 a.m. to 3:13 a.m. When the feed came back, the door was wide open. Something had happened during that blackout. Something that didn't want to be seen. That day at work, I couldn't focus. I was half expecting to see that spiral etched onto my computer screen or hear the whispers through my earbuds. But the worst part was this growing feeling deep in my chest, that I wasn't alone, even outside the house. That whatever had started in that basement, it had come with me. I tried to shake it off. I told myself I was tired, overworked, stressed, But then the voices started. Not whispers this time. Clear, loud, calling my name. Always between 3 o'clock and 3:15 a.m. I'd wake up with my heart pounding, my name echoing in my ears. Not from inside my head, from the hallway. Once, I even opened the door. There was no one there, but the spiral was back. This time, it was in the carpet, not carved, just darker than the surrounding fabric. Stained, and the word was still there. Open. I started reading the journal obsessively, trying to understand, trying to prepare. The next entries were increasingly frantic. Asterisk April 14th. The door is almost ready. I didn't mean to open it, but the rituals, they weren't games. They weren't symbols. They were keys, and I turned them. Asterisk April 15th. It walks during the thinning, when the veil is weakest, between 3 and 3:15. It learns your name. It becomes you. Asterisk April 16th. I heard it last night. It was in the basement, speaking with my voice, laughing like me. If I see it, I don't know what will happen. I think it's already wearing me. Asterisk. These weren't just the ramblings of a paranoid man. They were a warning, and I'd ignored them. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the couch, journal in my lap, flashlight, and a kitchen knife beside me. At 2:59 a.m., the air changed. It became heavy, still, and then the breathing started. It came from the vents. Low, guttural. Inhale, exhale, as though the entire house was breathing in sync. Then the lights flickered. My watch ticked over to 3 a.m., and the door upstairs creaked open. Not all the way, just enough. Enough for someone or something to look out. I stood up slowly, my legs trembling. The house groaned. Then footsteps. Heavy, slow, but this time they were coming down the stairs. I didn't want to see it. I didn't want to look, but I couldn't move. The footsteps stopped halfway. Then a voice spoke. My voice. Why are you afraid? I choked. My throat locked up. That was me. But not me. It was wrong. Hollow, like someone had heard me speak once and was imitating it through broken glass. Come see. Come see what you really are. I backed away, gripping the knife, shaking from head to toe. The lights flickered again, and then all went out. Total darkness. I screamed, not out of fear, out of instinct. And then everything went silent. I stood there in the dark, listening, waiting. No more footsteps. No more voice. I grabbed the flashlight and flicked it on. The stairs were empty. I went room to room. Nothing. Until I reached the hallway mirror. There were two reflections. Me and something behind me. But when I turned around, nothing. I looked back at the mirror. Just me and the spiral burned into the glass. I covered the mirror with a sheet and locked myself in the bedroom. I didn't sleep. The next morning, I found something under my pillow. A tooth. Small. Yellowed. Human. It wasn't mine. The tooth stayed in a plastic bag on my kitchen table for 2 days. I couldn't throw it out. I couldn't bring myself to touch it again, either. It felt like a threat, like a message, as if whatever was in that house had reached a new stage. It didn't need to whisper anymore. It could touch me, leave things behind. I tried calling a dentist, a doctor, anyone who might have a logical explanation. But what was I supposed to say? Hi! I woke up and found a human tooth under my pillow. And no, I haven't lost any teeth myself. I stopped sleeping. Or at least, not in the traditional sense. I drift off during the day. In short, twitchy naps on the couch with the TV on for background noise. The house seemed quieter then. Or maybe it was just easier to pretend it was. But every night, as 3 a.m. approached, the dread returned. And it always started the same way. The air shifted. Pressure built in my ears. Cold crept through the baseboards like smoke. And then the house breathed. By the 5th night, I was starting to lose track of time. Reality felt thin, like a poorly glued wallpaper peeling off the walls. I caught myself staring at the spiral on the bathroom tile for 10, maybe 20 minutes, not blinking. It wasn't a drawing anymore. It was growing, spreading, darkening. I knew then that I couldn't wait for this thing to stop. It wouldn't stop. I had to do something. I went to the local library, not really expecting to find much. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but I started with town history, property records, old newspapers. It was a librarian, an older woman named Mrs. Beck, who finally noticed how long I'd been sitting there. "You were searching that house on Lambert Street?" she asked, frowning. I looked up, startled. "How did you know?" Her expression darkened. "You're the fifth person I've seen come in here asking about that place over the years. They all wanted answers. None of them found peace. What do you know about it?" She hesitated, then sat down beside me. Back in the 60s, it was owned by a man named Albin Caro, a reclusive historian. He studied folklore, rituals, old languages. People said he went too deep. Too deep how? Neighbors said he used to chant in the backyard at night, burned strange herbs, left symbols in the snow during winter. One night, he was found in the attic, surrounded by candles, eyes burned out, tongue missing. My stomach turned. What did they say happened to him? They called it suicide, but the coroner's report was sealed. One of the officers on the scene quit the next day, said he saw something crawling in the walls, something that mimicked his voice. She looked at me, her voice dropping lower. They said Caro wasn't just researching the occult. He was inviting it, said he found a way to tear a hole through the veil. I swallowed. My throat was dry. "You believe that?" Mrs. Beck didn't answer. She just pushed an old newspaper article across the table. The headline read, "Local historian found dead in ritual circle. House declared unsafe." There was a black and white photo of the house. The same cracked shingles, the same crooked front steps, the same spiral carved into the front door. That night, I returned home as the sun was setting. I almost didn't go in. The house looked darker than usual, as if it knew I'd uncovered part of its secret. Still, I stepped inside. Slowly, carefully. It felt warmer than usual, but not in a comforting way. More like the breath of something huge, hiding just behind the walls. I sat at the kitchen table, the journal in front of me. There was one entry I hadn't read yet. I think I was saving it. Or maybe I was scared of what it would say. Asterisk April 18th. It wears the face of the one you fear, the one you pity. It waits in the thin places, the staircase, the mirror, the bed. It wants to be seen. That's how it gets in. That's how it learns you. Asterisk. Don't let it see you afraid. Too late. At 2:57 a.m., the lights flickered. I grabbed the knife, the flashlight, and the journal. I was done hiding. I made my way upstairs, careful not to make a sound. The spiral room was open. It hadn't been open since the first time. But now, the door stood wide and something flickered inside. Candlelight. I stepped in. The walls were covered in writing, not in ink, in something darker, something thick and brown, drying in drips and spirals. The floor had been cleared of furniture. In its place was a circle, a ritual space, symbols drawn in salt and ash, bones laid out in precise angles, and in the center, a mirror, tall, old, framed in rusted iron. The surface shimmered slightly. I stepped closer. In the reflection, I saw myself. Then I saw the version of me standing just behind. It didn't blink. Its face was pale, mouth too wide, eyes hollow, and it smiled. I turned, and nothing was there, but in the mirror it remained. And then it moved. It reached out, pressed a hand against the inside of the mirror, fingers long and thin. The surface rippled. It was trying to get through. I stepped back. My heart slammed in my chest. I raised the knife. I didn't know what I was doing. Maybe if I shattered the mirror, it would stop. I swung. The blade hit the glass with a high-pitched ring, but it didn't crack. The reflection grinned wider. And then, without warning, I was pulled forward. The air behind me pushed. The floor rolled. The mirror wasn't a reflection anymore. It was a door, and it was open. I fought it, screamed, grabbed the frame, but the force was too strong. I was halfway in when a sound exploded behind me. A deep, echoing chant. Words I didn't understand, coming from everywhere at once. The pressure released. I fell backward, gasping. The mirror went dark. No reflection. No me, just black. And in the silence that followed, I heard it whisper. Almost. After that night, I refused to sleep in the house. I packed a duffel bag with some clothes, the journal, and what little food I had left, and I drove around until sunrise. I sat in the parking lot of a 24-hour gas station, sipping cold coffee and staring at my own reflection in the windshield. Every time I blinked, I expected to see the other me, asterisk at asterisk, in the back seat, but it never showed up, at least not that night. When morning finally broke, I returned to the house just long enough to grab my laptop and call off work for the rest of the week. I told them I was sick. That part wasn't a lie. I looked like I hadn't slept in days. My skin had gone pale, my eyes rimmed red. Even my voice had a tremor I couldn't control. I didn't tell them the real reason. I didn't say I was being watched, or that my reflection had tried to pull me into a mirror in the middle of a blood-covered room. They would have had me committed. I started sleeping in the car, parked across the street, engine off, keys in hand, just close enough to watch the house, but far enough to bolt if anything happened. It felt like the only control I had left. The house never stayed quiet, even with the windows up and doors locked. I could hear it at night, shifting, breathing. Sometimes I thought I saw movement in the upstairs windows, just a quick flicker of shadow crossing behind the curtains. The spiral room especially. There was always something wrong about a window. It never caught the light, not even during the day. Around the third night of sleeping in the car, a knock came on my window. I jolted awake, hand on the door handle, ready to run. But it was just the old man from 2 houses down, the one I'd waved at the first week I moved in. His face was worn, deep lines pulled down by years and some quiet sadness. He had a heavy coat on and carried a thermos of what I assumed was coffee. "You the new tenant?" he asked through the glass. I hesitated, then cracked the window just a bit. "Yeah." He nodded slowly. "Figured. You looked too normal the first time I saw you. That place, it doesn't let you stay that way for long." I blinked. "You know what's in there?" He glanced over his shoulder at the house. "No one really does. Not anymore. I've lived on this street for 50 years. Seen that house eat people alive. Young couple in the 90s. Woman in 2006. That real estate agent who tried to flip it 5 years ago. They die." He shook his head. "Worse. Some just disappeared. Others ran into the street screaming, bleeding, never said a word again. One man walked into the woods behind it and was never found." He took a sip from the thermos. "The worst part? The town just lets it happen. Doesn't care. It's like the house wants people to forget what it does." My hands were trembling again. "Why hasn't anyone burned it down?" His eyes darkened. "Because no one can." I frowned. "What do you mean?" He looked me dead in the eyes. "People have tried, but the fire doesn't catch. Or the flames go cold. And the ones who try, they don't last long. The silence between us stretched long." He took another sip and handed me a folded piece of paper. This was left in my mailbox 10 years ago. No name, just that symbol on the back. I turned it over. The spiral, drawn in thick, black ink, nearly identical to the one carved on the front door. I opened it. It was a page for what looked like another journal, scrawled in handwriting not unlike the one I'd found. Just a few lines. Asterisk, the house is a mouth. It doesn't live, it hungers. Asterisk. Every ritual, every blood offering, every whisper in the dark, feeds it. Asterisk, it mimics us, studies us, but it isn't human. It isn't even alive. Asterisk. Asterisk, it's a door. And one day it will open wide enough to let something through. Asterisk. The bottom of the note was stained with something brownish red. I didn't ask what it was. The old man turned to leave, but paused. Don't go back in there. Whatever you saw, it's only the beginning. He walked away, leaving me clutching the page, my knuckles white. But I did go back. That night, because I couldn't stay away. Because I needed answers. Because something in that house had seen me, touched me, and now I felt pulled. I stepped inside just before midnight. The air was thick, like the atmosphere before a thunderstorm. My breath came out in mist, and my ears popped with pressure. The spiral room door was closed again. I didn't go there. Not yet. Instead, I went to the attic. The one place I hadn't dared check since the very first time I toured the house. The stairs groaned louder the higher I went. The air grew thinner. Dust swirled in lazy circles, disturbed by nothing I could see. At the top of the stairs, the door stood cracked. I pushed it open. The attic was enormous, larger than it should have been, based on the size of the house. The ceiling sloped high into darkness. Boxes littered the floor, all sealed shut with wax. Symbols were drawn in chalk around the room. Circles, runes, more spirals. And in the center, a large wooden chest sat under a canvas sheet. I pulled it off. Inside, I found bones. Small ones. Bird bones. Cat skulls. Bundles of dried herbs tied with human hair. And underneath all of it, another journal. This one was older, bound in cracked leather. The pages smelled of mildew and rot. Some were stuck together. Others had been torn out. But the entries were different, not just observations or warnings. These were instructions, rituals to open the door, methods to protect the mind from invasion, steps to reverse the house's hunger. And one final note, scrawled in the corner margin, if you're reading this, it's already inside you. I dropped the book. My fingers were numb. The cold in the attic had become unbearable. But something else made me freeze. The sound, breathing, slow, ragged, wet breathing, coming from the darkest corner of the attic. I turned slowly, and I saw it. Not fully, not yet. Just the outline, the shape, the suggestion of a face. Pale, hollow-eyed, mouth open as if gasping. It stepped forward, and the shadows clung to it like a second skin. It looked like me. No, not like me. It was me, but twisted, worn down, eyes sunken, skin gray, hair damp and matted, like a version of me that had died a week ago and come back wrong. It raised a hand, palm outward. On its skin, the spiral had been burned into flesh. And then it spoke in my voice. You let me in. I ran. I don't remember my feet hitting the stairs. Don't remember pulling open the front door. Just the sound of my heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped animal. And that voice, asterisk my voice asterisk, chasing me down the hall. You let me in. I didn't stop until I was back in the car. Door slammed shut, engine stuttering to life. I peeled off down the street with tires screeching against wet pavement, not daring to look in the rear-view mirror. I knew if I did, I'd see it sitting in the back seat, staring at me with hollow eyes. I didn't sleep that night, or the next. Something had changed. I could feel it in my skin and the back of my eyes, like something had been planted inside me, a seed just waiting to grow. The journal I found in the attic sat unopened on the passenger seat. I couldn't bring myself to touch it again, but I couldn't throw it away either. It felt alive, and it watched me. Yes, I know how that sounds. But I swear, when I looked at it too long, the edges of the pages seemed to breathe. The spiral on the cover pulsed, like a slow heartbeat. The town looked different now, too. People crossed the street to avoid me. Some stared too long. Others didn't look at me at all, like I'd become invisible. I went to the hardware store to buy salt and a crowbar. The man behind the counter didn't say a word, just rang me up and slid a folded note across the counter instead of a receipt. It said, "Get out before it finishes copying you." I left without a word. That night, I stayed at a motel on the edge of town. I kept the blinds shut, the lights on, but I still saw shadows moving along the walls, shapes that didn't match anything in the room. At exactly 3:33 a.m., my phone rang. No number, Just one word flashing across the screen. Home. I let it ring. The voicemail that followed made my stomach turn cold. It was me, breathing, whispering. You left the door open. The call ended with a soft, wet click, like something sticky being peeled from flesh. I threw the phone across the room, but it rang again. This time, it wasn't a call. It was FaceTime, and the image that filled the screen wasn't my motel room. It was the attic. The camera slowly panned, shaky and erratic, as if someone or something was holding the phone and walking in circles. The chest was open. The symbols on the floor had been redrawn in what looked like fresh blood. And standing in the center of it all was me. But not quite. Its mouth was too wide. Its smile too steady. And its eyes, they didn't blink. I hit Yendi and yanked the battery from the phone. Sleep never came. By morning, I knew what I had to do. I couldn't run anymore. I had to go back. Not to fight it. Because I didn't think that was possible, but to understand it. To finish what had been started. Or at least find a way to stop it from spreading. From leaving that house and attaching itself to someone else. Because I wasn't the first. And I wouldn't be the last. I returned at dusk. The house looked smaller somehow. Weaker. But as I stepped onto the porch, it breathed again, groaning through its beams, sighing to the floorboards. I opened the front door. Inside, everything was exactly where I'd left it, except the mirrors. Every reflective surface was covered in black cloth. Even the small ones, the toaster, the bathroom sink faucet, the window glass at the back of the stove, hidden, and written in chalk on the living room wall, scrawled in massive, jagged letters. Do not look at yourself. My voice came back in fragments. From the walls, the vents, the pipes under the floor. You let me in. You are me now, /. It's your turn to watch. I moved quickly, spreading salt across the thresholds, around the spiral room, the attic stairs, even across the mirrors covered in cloth. I didn't know if it would work, but I had to try something. Then I went to the basement, the one place I hadn't dared go. It was colder than it should have been, the light bulb at the bottom flickering even before I touched the chain. The steps groaned beneath my feet. The walls were wet. Black mold pulsed in patches across the stone. And at the far end of the basement, partially hidden by a support beam, was another door. Smaller. It looked ancient. The wood blackened, the edges warped, carved into the center, a spiral with teeth. I opened the journal again, flipping to the last pages. There it was, the mouth. Asterisk behind this door is not a room. It is the space between things, the place where copies are made and identities rot. The mouth eats what we are, then spits back what we pretend to be. Asterisk. Asterisk to seal it. Blood must be given, not spilled. Asterisk offered starved. Asterisk. My hand shook as I turned the page. A final ritual. A drawing of the spiral. A symbol I hadn't seen before. Asterisk, and I'd drawn inside the spiral. With a crack through the pupil. Asterisk. Then asterisk speak its name aloud, but only once. Give it your true reflection. Do not blink. Do not look away. Let's see you. Asterisk. I didn't know what it meant by give it your true reflection, but I had no choice left. I grabbed a shard of broken mirror from the pile under the basement stairs. Then I opened the door. Behind it was blackness, not darkness. Blackness. A cold, so deep it pulled the breath from my lungs. A silence so loud it screamed. And then the whisper. 100 voices layered together. You came back. I held the mirror up. I didn't know what I expected, but it wasn't this. The reflection in the mirror wasn't me. It was a thing from the attic, grinning, crying black tears. It reached out, placing its hand against the glass from the other side. I stood frozen. Then I said the name from the journal. I spoke at once, just once, and something in the air snapped, like the sound of bone breaking underwater. The spiral burned itself into the air between us. The mirror cracked, spiderweb lines splitting the image apart. The reflection opened its mouth and screamed. The room filled with wind, sucking backward into mouth. Books flew from shelves. Salt lifted into the air like dust. The house howled. And then, silence. The mirror was gone. The black door slammed shut, and I collapsed. I woke up the next morning in the grass outside. The house behind me was quiet, empty. Still, I stood up, walked to my car, and left. I've been gone 3 days now. I'm in a different city, in a new motel. But the TV turns on by itself at night. The mirrors fog up even when there's no steam. And sometimes, just sometimes, when I close my eyes, I see me, standing in the spiral room, smiling. The motel room felt safer at first. Cleaner, brighter. I'd chosen one with no mirrors, no vents, no crawl spaces. I even covered the television with a blanket. Still, the sense of being watched never left. I'd fall asleep for minutes at a time and wake up with my heart racing. Each time, I swore I heard breathing right next to my ear. But when I turned, the room was still silent, save for the low hum of the neon sign outside flickering through the drapes. I started to think maybe the ritual worked, that I'd sealed whatever was behind that door. Maybe I could move on, get a new place, start fresh. But then the noises started again, not inside the motel. Inside me, it began with a tick, a soft, wet clicking sound at the base of my skull. I thought it was stress, maybe nerves, but it didn't stop. It grew louder each day, syncing with my heartbeat until I couldn't tell where the sound ended and my thoughts began. Then came the dreams, always the same. I'd wake up in the spiral room, standing in front of the black door, holding the mirror shard. The cracked spiral shimmered on the door surface, and I could feel it breathing through the wood, pulling me closer. I never opened the door, but I always woke up with the mirror shard in my hand, and I hadn't brought it with me. The journal was gone. I noticed it the third morning. I'd left it locked in the glove box, wrapped in a towel. But when I checked, there was nothing there. No sign it had ever been placed there at all. In its place, a single page, thin, wrinkled, written in my own handwriting. Asterisk, you said it once. That's all it needs. Asterisk. That day, I looked in a mirror. I shouldn't have. I was brushing my teeth at a gas station bathroom halfway between two towns. Just try and feel human again. I'd avoided reflection for weeks, but I was exhausted. I thought one glance wouldn't hurt. I was wrong. My reflection didn't move when I did. It stood still, eyes locked onto mine, mouth slightly open, like it had something to say, but was waiting for permission. Then it smiled and raised its hand. Blood dripped from its palm. Mine was clean. I left everything behind. The car, my phone, my wallet. I walked for hours through empty fields, old roads, silent woods, just trying to get away from myself. But it followed in shadows, in puddles, in windows. Every time I turned, I caught the shape of it. Asterisk me asterisk, watching, waiting, smiling. I found another town. Small, quiet, the kind with one grocery store and a diner that closes at 7. I got a room above the bar. Paid cash. Told the owner I was writing a book. She smiled. Said she liked mysteries. I told her this one was about identity. She laughed and told me not to lose mine. Too late. That night, I dreamed of the attic. But it was new. The spiral was gone. The chest replaced by a mirror wall. And behind the glass, hundreds of versions of me stare back. Some crying. Some screaming. Some grinning like they'd won. And one of them, that one stepped forward, pressed his palm to the glass, and whispered, asterisk, you only close the door for yourself. Not for me. Asterisk. I woke up gasping. The mirror across the room was fogged, and there was a single handprint on the inside. I started writing everything down, every whisper, every twitch, every time I lost track of hours or found myself somewhere I didn't remember walking to. The more I wrote, the clearer it became. I was splitting. Something had followed me out of the house. Not the creature, not the ghost. The door, it wasn't just in the basement. It was me now, open. I began seeing the spiral in places it shouldn't be. In spilled coffee, in dust on windows, in the curl of my hair. in bruises forming on my skin in concentric circles. I visited a local library, asked for anything about the original owner of my old house. The librarian, a hunchwoman with clouded eyes, paused before answering. She said, "That house doesn't like being remembered." I asked if she knew about the rituals. She only nodded and said, "He called himself a gate, not a person. A gate." I left without another word. Later that night, I found a note slipped under my door. It said, "Asterisk, the gate is never closed. It only chooses who walks through, asterisk." The spiral was drawn at the bottom. I tried one more thing. Desperation makes you stupid. I booked a train to the coast, somewhere wet and isolated. I thought maybe I could drown the door. Maybe the ocean could wash it out of me. On the train, I sat alone, until a man took the seat across from me. Pale, thin, familiar. He didn't speak. He only smiled. And when the conductor asked for my ticket, he handed over his. It had my name on it. I looked at the reflection in the window. We were both gone. Only the spiral remained. I woke up in the attic. Not the house's attic. My mind's attic. The spiral drawn across the floor. The mirror shard in my hand. And a voice in my head. Your turn to watch. It's strange how silence becomes its own kind of sound. After the train ride, I stayed nowhere. I wandered, sleeping in empty bus stations, under bridges in fields. Anything that had no walls, no mirrors, no reflections. I didn't speak to anyone, didn't use my real name. I thought if I could lose myself completely, maybe the thing inside me would get lost too, but it didn't. Everywhere I went, it left reminders, dead birds in my path, broken spirals carved into tree bark, hotel receipts with my signature on them, places I'd never stayed, names whispered through broken radios. Then came the voices. They started as echoes in my thoughts, words that weren't mine, phrases that didn't belong in the moment. He sees through you. There is no body, only passage. The spiral is hungry. It got worse. I began to hear them even when I was awake, in water pipes, in wind through the trees, in the hum of lights. It was always the same voice, my own, except older, colder. One night, deep in the woods, I found a clearing. I was half-starved, shaking, exhausted, but the air was still, the moonlight clear, and in the middle of the clearing was a small cabin. I knew I hadn't walked far enough to reach another town, and I hadn't seen a single road, but there was real solid, and the front door was slightly open. Inside, it looked exactly like my old living room, down to the same couch, the same picture on the wall, even the creak in the floorboards by the coffee table. I should have run, but I didn't. I walked in, sat on the couch, and waited. Then the door to the attic opened, and something stepped down. It wore my face, but the eyes weren't mine. They were pitch black, bottomless. It spoke in my voice. You let me out. I couldn't speak, couldn't move. It sat beside me. We stared forward in silence. Then it leaned close and whispered, You're tired. Let me take over. And for a moment, I almost said yes. I didn't sleep at all that night. I sat up in bed with the covers pulled to my chest, eyes darting around the darkened room. Every small creak of the floorboards or a distant rustle of wind outside made my skin crawl. I kept replaying the vision of the shadowy figure standing at the edge of my bed, whispering words I still couldn't understand. My mind raced, flipping through everything I had read in the journal. There had to be something in there I missed, some answer, some explanation. The next morning, I stumbled out of bed, exhausted and on edge. I didn't shower. I barely ate. I pulled the journal back out from under the loose floorboard and read it again, every page, every line. I wasn't just looking for answers anymore. I was begging for them. And on the final page, written in a tight, frantic hand I hadn't noticed before, were 5 words that chilled me to the bone. It never wants to leave. I stared at the sentence. The ink smudged and smeared like someone had written it while crying or shaking. I had missed it before. It was like it had appeared out of nowhere. By mid-morning, I was desperate. I decided to confront Henry. He had known more than he let on. He had to. I knocked on his door, and when he opened it, he looked older, more tired than before. His hands trembled slightly, and his eyes scanned the hallway nervously before waving me in. He didn't wait for me to speak. He just sighed. "You've seen it now, haven't you?" I nodded. Henry sat at his kitchen table, motioned for me to do the same, and then slid a small black and white photo across the table. The picture was faded, curled at the edges. It showed my house, only it looked even more worn down. And standing in the window of the attic was a dark silhouette that was taken in 1963. Henry said, "A friend of mine lived there then. He swore something lived in the attic. Heard chanting, whispers, smelled burnt incense at night. One night he just snapped, ran into the street screaming. Never came back." "What is it, Henry?" He looked at me with pity in his eyes. That house was never just a house. The man who built it, he wasn't right. Obsessed with spirits. He thought he could invite something in and control it. But you don't control things like that. You just open the door and pray it doesn't step through. Henry opened a drawer and pulled out a worn map. He pointed to a mark behind my house. "A tree. There's something buried under that tree," he whispered. "A box, sealed in iron. That's where it started." I left Henry's place with a shovel, heart pounding. It had begun to rain, light at first, then heavier as I reached a gnarled old tree. It was twisted and blackened, unlike any other tree in the yard. I didn't wait. I started digging. The earth was soft, almost too soft, as though it wanted to be disturbed. I dug for what felt like hours, the sky darkening above. Thunder rumbled low in the distance. Finally, I hit something solid. Wood. It was a small box, about the size of a shoebox. I pulled it up and dropped it on the ground. The box was bound with rusted iron clasps. My hand shook as I pried it open. Inside was a bundle of items. Old bones, a doll with button eyes, and a small book wrapped in cloth. I reached for the book and unfolded the fabric. On the cover, written in a language I didn't understand, was a symbol, a circle of thorns around a single eye. The wind howled as I opened it. The pages were filled with incantations, symbols, and warnings. I didn't need to read the language to understand the message. It had been a ritual. A door had been opened, and the thing inside my house, it had come through. That night, the temperature in the house plummeted. Frost formed on the inside of the windows. I built a fire, but the flames barely gave off warmth. I tried to sleep, but couldn't. I felt watched. I heard it pacing above me. At exactly 3:33 a.m., the footsteps stopped. The fire flickered violently, and the room fell silent. Then came the whisper. "It's your turn." The voice was right next to my ear. Cold breath tickled my neck. I turned, but nothing was there. I didn't sleep. I didn't even lie down. I sat on the floor with the iron-bound box beside me and the book open in my lap. I wasn't just afraid anymore. I was being hunted. The final night began with a silence, so thick it felt like the house itself was holding its breath. The usual creaks were gone. No footsteps, no whispers, just silence. And that silence was worse than the noise. I couldn't stay still. I walked from room to room. The journal clutched in my hands like a lifeline. My thoughts raced, flipping between the symbols I'd seen in the book I'd unearthed and the chilling last line in the journal. It never wants to leave. I realized then, this thing wasn't just haunting the house. It was bound to it. And now that I had disturbed the burial site, now that I had opened that box and read from that book, I had become part of the binding. It wasn't going to let me go. I went up to the attic. My breath clouded in front of me with every exhale. The door creaked open, revealing the same dusty space filled with forgotten furniture and decaying boxes. But now the air buzzed, thick, heavy, and at the far end of the attic, something moved. A shape, not human, too tall, too thin, limbs that bent wrong. Its face was a swirl of shifting shadows, and where its eyes should have been, there were two black pits that pulled at my vision. I couldn't move. My body locked, frozen by fear. Then it spoke again, the same voice, whispered and broken, finished what he started. The journal's final pages flipped open on their own. The wind howled through the attic, yet the house itself remained still. That thing took a step forward, and with it, the air in my lungs turned to ice, or take his place. Suddenly I understood. The rituals weren't meant to summon something. They were meant to trap it. The original owner had tried to bind it inside the box, using the house as a cage, but the seal was incomplete. Over the years, the energy had weakened, and now that I'd dug up the remnants, now that I'd read from the book, I was the one who had to finish it. I fled the attic, stumbling down the stairs, clutching the book. I lit every candle I could find, drew the circle of thorn from memory, and placed the items back inside the box. I chanted the syllables as they appeared in the book. Words I didn't know, didn't understand, but that somehow felt natural on my tongue. The house groaned. The shadows writhed. That thing, whatever it was, screamed. Not a sound of pain, a sound of rage. Then silence. Everything stopped. The cold lifted. The lights flickered once, then steadied. I sat in the center of the circle, shaking the sealed box in front of me. I didn't sleep. I didn't even blink. At dawn, I packed a bag. I didn't take anything else. Just a journal in the box, now rebound with fresh iron wire. I drove. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I found a new place. Far away. Small. Bright. Plain. But at night, sometimes, I still hear the floorboards creak. Sometimes the air gets cold. And every now and then, I hear a whisper. It never wants to leave. The box is buried now, deepened before in concrete and iron. But I don't know if it's enough, because sometimes in the dark, I still feel it watching, waiting.